And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
The Liberty Podcast is brought to you by Proven Arms and Outfitters, specializing in rifles, pistols, tactical gear, and more. Learn more at ProvenOutfitters.com.
Hey, the Liberty Podcast is at the NCGOP convention in Greensboro today. It is Saturday, 25 May. We heard a rousing speech last night from Lara and Eric Trump in the big ballroom, and President Trump called in on the cell phone and shared his latest nuggets of information with the group. This morning we heard from Dan Bishop, running for Attorney General of North Carolina, and also from several other representatives. And now we are clearing out for lunch with Vivek Ramaswamy. We'll see you next time.
I'm here with a big group of people, so don't say anything inappropriate, but it's your biggest fans in North Carolina. It's the entire party. I'm here with the biggest fan and the very famous Lara Trump. And everybody is ready for you to win on November 5th.
I'd like to just say hello to everybody. I wish I was there. I wish I was there with them. But we're going to be there a lot. And, you know, it's a state that we did very well in. And you have fantastic people. And you have Lara that loves it maybe more than anybody because she happened to grow up there. Was born there and raised there. She loves it. And we won it twice. And we won the primaries twice. And we've nothing but victories there. So I just want to thank everybody. We're leading in all of the polls right now, every poll.
It's not that young people are against us, actually. It's that they're lost right now. Hungry for direction and purpose. You hear these protests after October 7th. You see protests on college campuses. One of them, they got the footage from it. They were chanting the word infitada when they were trying to chant intifada. It wasn't even the word. They don't even know what they're actually saying, right? And so we say anti-Semitism. I think it misses the mark a little bit. It's a sense of loss of purpose and meaning in this country. Right? If you're a young person, if you're any of us, forget young people, forget all of us, we need something that grounds us. Faith in God, belief in family, belief in nation, hard work, patriotism. When these things disappear, you got a black hole in your heart. And when you have a vacuum that runs that deep, that's when the poison fills the void.
Well, I survived the annual state Republican Party convention. As you can see, I'm back here in the secret studio beneath the pines after traversing from Greensboro at the end of last weekend. Great way to kick off the Memorial Day weekend, I must say. Immersed in the sausage making of state politics. I will say that the Republican Party needs to find a better venue than the convention center in Greensboro, which is about as antiquated as they come. It's an enormous facility, which is why they use it. But boy, it's just very tired, shall we say. But here we are, and it was a convention, the usual tediousness in the business meetings. But because it's North Carolina and it's a swing state of great importance, maybe the swing state, we attract to our convention marquee names to speak. Friday night, as I mentioned, we had Lara and Eric Trump, who engaged in a back and forth with the new NCGOP chairman, Jason Simmons. And then, of course, Eric did call Dad on the cell phone, and we heard from President Trump in the ballroom, just microphone next to the speaker and the iPhone. Pretty low tech, but it works. And then later in that day, after lunch, I had an opportunity to cross paths with former U.S. Congressman from North Carolina, Mark Walker, who has a new position. He's with the Republican National Committee as its Director of Minority and Faith Outreach. And let's dip into our conversation from Greensboro, and we'll be back right after that.
Hey, I'm here at the NC GOP convention in Greensboro with a very familiar face to all of us in state Republican politics. Mark Walker is here. We just left a very inspiring lunch event keynoted by Vivek Ramaswamy, who I think may have given us a different standard for how to deliver a speech. It was really good. Mark is currently the faith advisor to the Republican National Committee, and by extension, the Trump campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about how your role coordinates with the rest of the goals?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Steve, for the opportunity. Yeah, I think it's very important that our faith community, ministries, nonprofits, whatever the faith background is, to understand the true agenda of the left. We have found out that, for example, just in Georgia, that 42% of non-registered adult voters attend church regularly. We have to get these folks engaged, informed, and get them out at the polls, because we need these folks to really get out there and fight this fight.
And are they responsive?
Some of them are, but it's amazing to me in our culture, sometimes the people who really do not understand what the left's agenda is all about, and I'm going to call it this, maybe doesn't everybody agree, but the evil that we're battling from the left. And once you peel back a few layers, I think people are finally motivated to get engaged.
Do we as Republicans need to worry about this fake label that the left is assigning us called Christian nationalism? Or should we just ignore that and be who we are and believe in what we believe?
I think it's the latter. I think these are smoke screens. They're distractions to go out and debate things that do not have any foundation. Obviously, for different places and different groups, there are different issues that are important. But as far as chasing, to me, something there that I haven't seen a great deal of, I think leave that alone. Let's keep getting people to understand what the Republicans and conservatives and Christians stand for, which is certainly life. It's individual responsibility. Obviously, we're pro-Israel. Things that we're seeing the left no longer just try to hide, but try to put in our face. So I think that's what we need to do.
Mark Walker, thank you very much.
My privilege.
Great
Thank
seeing you here in Greensboro.
Well, we certainly thank Mark Walker for joining us, and it's apparent from what he said about the lack of registered voters who are devout church attendees is quite a stunning number, over 40%. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and we'll get to some more of that later in a report out today, May 30, in the Epoch Times newspaper and website. But first, I want to refer you to the Politico.com, not a conservative-friendly news organization, not really a news organization, but actually better, I would say, than some of the old standards like the New York Times and the Washington Post. They apparently, either with at the behest of the Biden campaign or of their own volition, did a very lengthy expose earlier this week about the sense of doom that has swept through the Biden regime and the Biden campaign. A pervasive sense of fear has settled in at the highest levels of the Democratic Party over President Joe Biden's re-election prospects. Nearly 5 months from the election, anxiety has morphed into palpable trepidation. That's a big word for you Democrats, but it means they're scared, okay? One of the people they talked to was a Democratic operative in close touch with the White House who had been granted anonymity to speak freely. So presumably granted anonymity by the Biden regime. One advisor to major Democratic Party donors has a running list that he shares with funders and the list contains, get this, nearly 24 reasons why Biden could lose in November, ranging from immigration, the lack of an immigration policy at the border, and high inflation, which is really just high prices cumulatively over the period of time since Biden was installed. And he says also that the list of why we could win is so small, I don't even need to keep a list of it on my phone. He just keeps the list of why we're going to lose. The donors are all asking the questions. How are we going to win if A and B and C and D are all in Trump's favor? They're coming to grips with that. It's very clear. However, this is really interesting. You know, despite their gloom and doom and their fear and their palpable trepidation, they still believe deep down that at the end of the day, what will drag Joe across the finish line? Wait for this: abortion, reproductive rights, because that they're going to make that the number one issue, and they think they're going to be able to gloss over all of the other train wrecks that define the Biden regime. This is really funny. This guy says, while agreeing that abortion should be a winning issue, they're challenged when pressed by their friends to make the case for why Biden will win. Pete Giangreco, longtime strategist who's worked on multiple Democratic campaigns, quote, "If the frame of this race is, what was better, the 3.5 years under Biden or 4 years under Trump, we lose that every day of the week and twice on Sunday, because life is not about abortion." That was end quote. And why does he say that? Because life is not about debating abortion rights. It's about every day. What are you facing in your real life experiences? Well, I don't think people spend hours around the kitchen table or at the diners or talking at work about abortion. I just don't think they do, whether they're for it or against it. Okay? And now we're seeing other organizations, Axios, again, like Politico, not a right-favoring publication. The meaning of the word inflation has changed. No kidding. It used to mean rising prices. Now it means high prices. Inflation, at least as officially measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, has come down sharply from its peak of 9% in mid-2022. Remember when Biden said it was 9% when he took office in 21? Lie. It peaked at 9% in mid-2022, a year after he had taken the helm, so to speak. It now stands at 3.4%, which is broadly in line with where it was for the quarter century between 83 and 2008. But here's the thing. A more intuitive concept of inflation is that, quote, am I paying higher prices for things than I used to? Am I paying higher prices now than I did before? Answer, yes. On a literal level, that should not be possible. Prices that are deflating can also be inflating. But that's the thing. Voters who think that inflation is high are likely to blame Biden for it and less likely to vote for him. And why is it high? It's high because cumulatively, inflation, the cost of life, is up 19.9%, even though the current stated inflation rate is 3.4%. Then Axios looked at another variable. Why do bills feel so high even though food inflation is technically low? The inflation rate for, quote, food at home, basically the stuff you buy at the supermarket, is really low these days, with prices rising just 1.1% over the past year. But since January 2021, get this, when Biden took office, and they do mean took, prices are up nearly 21%. Every time Americans go food shopping, they feel the sting of higher prices, making the grocery store the place where consumers are most regularly reminded about inflation. Yes, because we go there weekly, maybe more than once a week, twice, 3 times. Dining out is worse, however. Prices rose 4.1% over the last year, far faster than the costs at grocery stores. And now, here comes the always anticipated downward revision of official government data. This just today, reported by Zero Hedge. What was until recently a, quote, red hot, end quote, economy, with the U.S. reportedly growing at an annual rate of 4.9% in quarter 3 and 3.4% in Q4, has suddenly and dramatically downshifted. And according to the latest GDP data released from the Biden's BEA, they use all these awful acronyms. Q1 GDP has been revised downward from 1.6 to just 1.3%, which was the lowest GDP since the mini recession of Q2. The sharp downward revision primarily reflected a downward revision to consumer spending, which rose 2.0%, down from 2.5% in the first GDP report. So there you have it. The numbers are all trending in the wrong way. And yet, what is the savior for the Biden campaign, according to their brilliant strategists? Abortion, ladies and gentlemen. You can't make it up. Now, you're familiar with thehill.com. Thehill.com partners with an independent entity called the Decision Desk HQ election forecast model, and they have begun to start plotting the data that will ultimately lead to the elections in November. And by the way, don't forget, people talk about 160 days to election day. In some states, it's like 114 days until early voting starts. That would be South Dakota, Virginia, and I think Minnesota, maybe. So we're talking about 4 months until people start voting for president and other offices. Now, let's get back to the election forecast model, a powerful tool for in-depth analysis and predictions. All right, the model considers hundreds of data points, including polling, economic indicators, national and local political trends, etc. And let's see what's going on currently with the Decision Desk, because they've got some numbers here for us. Right now, the Decision Desk says that Donald Trump has a 56% chance of being elected in November compared to Biden's 44% chance. And right now, they project where we stand today that Trump already can be assured of 235 of the 270 required electoral votes that he must secure, minimum 270 on election day. Now, that leaves a lot of electoral votes in play, obviously. If my math is correct, that would be 45. But it's late May, and again, we still have time for the continuation of this trend. And this Decision Desk, which the Hill will be providing us regular dosages of their data dumps, will continue to be, merit our close attention, shall we say. Now, I can't believe it, as this Trump trial, so-called, is meandering along in New York. And by the time you watch this podcast, we may have a verdict, but that remains to be seen. But I do want to share with you some excellent news reported just in the past few days by the Epoch Times. Republicans are closing the gap on voter registrations in key swing states. Political observers say it could be a sign that the party will perform well in November. Yes, I think it could be a sign, especially when you start digging into these numbers. Get this. The gap between registered voters in the Democratic Party and Republican Party shrank significantly in Pennsylvania, Nevada, and North Carolina, according to voter registration data collected in April. In Arizona, a fourth critical state, Republicans registered voters by more than 71% during the same period. So they're way ahead in registrations in Arizona, too. The four states are among the most prized possessions in presidential politics. Collectively, they represent 52 electoral votes. How about that? So getting into the numbers a little more carefully here, a little more closely, the largest numerical shift occurred in Pennsylvania, where the Democrat lead in registration has sunk by some 400,000 votes since May of 2019. In May of 2019, more than 4 million were registered as Democrats and about 3.2 million as Republicans. But by the end of April 2024, almost 3.9 million Pennsylvanians were registered, and nearly 3.5 million were registered as Republicans. So the Republicans have gone from 3.2 5 years ago to 3.5 registered Republicans in Pennsylvania, which is a major state. You cannot win a presidential election without Pennsylvania. Let's go to North Carolina, close to home. Well, we know potentially the swing state, which shows the biggest percentage of change in registration occurred right here. And the most significant statistic is that unaffiliated voters now exceed those of either major party in North Carolina. Now, that is really worth pausing to consider, because that means that the battleground is really for the unaffiliated voters. Unaffiliated. And why are they unaffiliated? There are many possible explanations for that. They've become disenfranchised by one of their parties, either the Democrats or the Republicans, or they really despise Trump, or they think the 2020 election was a fraud, a sham, and they're fed up. There's a lot of reasons for that. In North Carolina, the unaffiliated electorate grew to about 2.7 million from 2.2 in April 2019. In that same period, the number of registered Republicans rose from 2 million to 2.2 million. That's significant. While the number of registered Democrats in North Carolina fell to 2.4 million from about 2.5 million. Wow. Ultimately, the unaffiliated vote will decide the statewide races in North Carolina. No kidding. So, note to self, A, don't assume that your close friends and fellow Republicans are all registered to vote. Ask the question, are you registered to vote? If not, show them how. And B, keep an eye on the unaffiliateds and talk to them and explain to them why they need to vote for Trump and the Republican ticket in 24. Let's go to Nevada. The greatest total growth in voter registration occurred in the Silver State, Nevada. Overall registration grew by 1/3 to more than 2.3 million voters registered in April 2024 from 1.7 million in 2019. During that period, the number of registered Republicans rose to about 654,000. The number of Democrat voters grew at a slower pace to more than 708,000. There are still about 54,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans in Nevada, but the party's advantage has fallen by 43% in just 5 years. In Arizona, the total number of registered voters rose to more than 4 million from 3.8 million over this 5-year period that we've been discussing. Between April 2019 and April 2024, the Republican Party grew its registration advantage over its rival by 71% in Arizona. That's unbelievable. But our work is never done. We have to continue to push registration, because getting the vote out will determine this election more than any other factor. You can count on that. Pardon me while I hydrate. Essentia. It's essential to me. Let's just put it that way. Now, I have to go local on you here, because once again, I read the Pilot newspaper, quote unquote, newspaper, so that you don't have to. Public service from me to you. Now, before I get into the essence of this mealy-mouthed Pilot editorial, which was published on May 29, for those of you keeping track, let's understand the root cause of what the Pilot is complaining about regarding Moore County public schools. The Biden administration has so thoroughly hijacked the long-standing Title IX, which was established a half a century or more ago to protect the rights of women in sports in high school and college. A perfectly noble thing to protect. And we have seen over the many decades the impact of Title IX being enforced and making sure that there is, relative equality for women in sports. But now Title IX has been hijacked by the left, by the Biden regime, as a way to enforce LGBTQ so-called rights and the scourge of transgenderism, which is sweeping our young people, which is a reflection more so of mental illness than a need or a longing to ignore the gender that they have been assigned by their creator, by God. So the pilot is all up in arms because Moore County Schools and the school board in 2022 very wisely passed a parental bill of rights with a very important goal, which is to make sure that educators and administrators in our public schools do not shield parents from their children's questions and inquiries and even actionable steps toward gender transitioning. But also contained in this Bill of Rights, which is something you would formerly have called common sense, is this: teachers are prohibited from having any materials in their classrooms, quote, that discuss or share a person's sexual activity, sexuality, or gender identity, end quote, according to the implementation guide which accompanies the Bill of Rights policy. Writes the pilot, that means that no child with gay or lesbian parents may read about other families who look like theirs. They are treated like aberrations. Well, I would sternly disagree with that. And here's why. For one thing, the pilot omits the fact that this policy regarding materials referencing and embellishing sexuality, the policy limits it to grades kindergarten through 4. So we're not talking about all of public education and all of the grades. We're talking about little kids, children, nearly post-infants from kindergarten to 4th graders. That's who this is aimed at protecting. So they're not aberrations at this point. They're children. Now, my mother, for 50 years, a half century, was a preschool teacher. And the most important things that preschoolers learn are not about their gender or about sexuality. And what they continue to learn as they advance into kindergarten, 1st grade, and so on and so forth are the bedrock fundamentals of learning. First, they teach them how to learn, and then they begin to learn. And that is the essence of public education. The pilot says the Parental Bill of Rights was nothing more than an attempt to score culture war points. No, it's an attempt to stop a growing trend in public education in which educators are deliberately excluding parents from any manner of dialogue that they're having with these kids during the school day. And it's a serious problem. So now you have this organization called PFLAG, FLAG, which is an advocacy group, let's call it, for the gay community, the trans community, whatever you want to call it. And they have filed a federal complaint against Moore County Schools. Now, what is a complaint? Well, it's not a lawsuit, so we'll see if it goes anywhere. But here's what the pilot. So the president of this flag group, her name is Erica Street, says, quote, "We made every effort to correct this on a local level," meaning the imposition of the Parental Bill of Rights, which they say removes books that discuss or share a person's gender identity. And the pilot goes on to opine that we have said from the very beginning that the school board, fresh off a November 2022 election that gave conservatives a supermajority, it sure did, zealously pursued this policy and even outpaced their state colleagues. Yes, the school board of Moore County did pass a Bill of Rights before the North Carolina legislature did, but they are very much mirrored policies, I would say. Today, there is nothing in classrooms in Moore County, claims the pilot, for students whose parents are gay or lesbian or transgender, or who are questioning their own sexual identity. Yes, that's right. And it needs to stay that way. Pilot, lefties, groomers. Remember who lives in this community. Despite these fringe groups who are always beating the drum for transgenderism and filthy pornographic books in our school libraries, despite these fringe people, this is a Christian, biblically rooted community in which we live. And the vast majority wish to protect small children from deviant, godless ideas, such as rejecting one's God-given gender. Now, if a child progresses through education and develops these notions of gender fluidity and wishes to embrace a alternative lifestyle, alternative sexuality, it's going to happen. It depends on the parenting. It depends on their exposure to church attendance and religious Christian principles. But I will say that regardless of that, there is no reason under the sun why we should ever tolerate that kind of nonsense, that kind of complexity being forced upon children who are in kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade. So I hope that the Moore County School Board stands its ground against this rather weak and flimsy complaint, which is really only intended to make a quick headline and get the attention of the pilot editorial board, which I think consists of maybe 2 people, maybe 1.5. I don't know for sure. But my friends, I want to thank you for joining us once again for yet another edition of the Liberty Podcast. And don't forget, we are presented by Proven Arms and Outfitters. They specialize in rifles, pistols, and tactical gear, and you can learn about everything they will make available to you, their faithful customers, at ProvenOutfitters.com, ProvenOutfitters.com. This is the Liberty Podcast. We'll be back for another episode and more careful analysis and insight next week. Thanks for joining us.
The Liberty Podcast is brought to you by Proven Arms and Outfitters, specializing in rifles, pistols, tactical gear, and more. Learn more at ProvenOutfitters.com.